Hello, everyone. My name is Menachem Shanowitz, and this is my first YouTube video. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate two ways how you can track user input in LWC, right? So that means when a user types something in a text box, you're able to get that data. Now, there's two ways to do it, as I mentioned, but one of them, in my opinion, is better than the other. So stay tuned to see why. Now, before I get into the details of that, I want to step back a bit and show you how it's done in the older Aura component framework. This will help us understand why things in LWC are done the way they are. So in Aura, you would define an attribute. An attribute is a property, just like an LWC property. And then you pass in that attribute into the Lightning input component. Now, whenever the user, now that is technically speaking a child component of the owner parent Aura component. And so, but nonetheless, when someone types something in the input box, it gets reflected on the attribute in your parent component. That's something that is unique to Aura. If you were to try to do that in LWC, and by the way, everything I'm saying here is not just inputs, of course, it's any child component in any public property. But I digress. If we were to, if in LWC, if we were to try to do the same thing, it wouldn't work, right? So I actually demonstrated that here, and as you can see, I named the property input doesn't work. Let me show you. So I have this property input doesn't work, right? That's the name of the property. And in the HTML, I'm referencing this as a value. But if I type something in here and then I try to save or print it, in this case, it's undefined. Why? Because in Aura, there's something called a two-way binding. That means a parent can define a property on the child component, and the child, when modifying the property, actually updates the property on the parent component. It's actually two-way street. In LWC, it doesn't exist. It's only one way. And so if you pass in a property from a parent to child, if the child makes a change to that, it doesn't get reflected back on the parent's property. So how does a child communicate with his parent? It's through something called an event. An event is basically saying an announcement to everyone, "Hey, I just did something, and this is what I did." And then the parent can receive that announcement and do something with it. That's what an event is. So if the user makes it so this leads us actually into the first way how you can track user input data in LWC. When the user makes a change, when the user types something into that box, it fires something called an onChange event. Now, when that event is fired in LWC over here, you could say onChange. When this happens, run this method, input one onChange. And when you run this method, it sets a property on the parent input one to be that of the value, to be that of the input that the user just typed up. So that's one way how it's done. And then, right, and then when we save the data, or we're logging the data in this case, it's going to work, right? As you can see here, it logged because we now updated that we explicitly updated the property input one to be that of what the user typed in. But there is another way, and I suggest a better way for this instance. If we go back to the HTML, you'll notice on the third, or the second, we'll call it input, I gave it, this is the second way how you can keep track of user input in LWC. I actually gave it its own ID. Now, you have to make sure to put the data dash prefix, otherwise you can mess things up. But we called it input2. Now, if I go back to the JS file, I don't have any tracker. I have no mechanism to track when the user makes a change on input2. But what I do know is that when I need the data, when I'm saving it, I can simply locate this component and then get its value. And I could save it, I could log it, I could do whatever I want. Now, why do I think this way is better? Because the inability of the child to modify the parent component, to modify the properties of the parent component, tells me that the properties of a component should belong only to itself, and there should not be extra properties on the parent to reflect that of the children. And so when you implement an on-change method to keep the parent property, this new parent property in sync with the child's property, you're in effect implementing your own two-way binding framework on top of LWC. And the right way to do it in LWC is that if you look at the HTML file, you see all these child components, right? You each of those components has their own properties self-contained within them. You don't need to have them reflected in the parent. And so all you need to do is locate the correct child component and then access that property. Anyway, I hope that helped. And let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me. And I'm happy to learn and I'm happy to share. I'm happy to discuss. Thank you.